Ranking the entire Patrick Troughton era. If you're not familiar with these videos, I'll be doing these rankings on the Tiermaker website. Right, and of course, this is the list shown where I'll be ranking them, and to explain all these ones, let me get into it for the first time viewers. Bonafide classics are stories that I consider to be the very best of the Patrick Troughton era, and are actually my favorites from that specific era. Near classics are stories that are very good, but they're missing beats or pieces that can actually make them a classic or a proper classic story that could have actually been in a bona fide classic, but they couldn't. Stuck in the middle are pretty much your average stories. Mere stories I don't really care for, and this one are just stories. No, just no, are just stories that just things are just poor in general. So, to kick things off, we have the Highlanders. I actually like this story. It's not exactly it's not exactly everyone's favorite, but I enjoyed the story in general. It's a shame it's missing. It introduced Jamie, and it's a fun story, even though it was a bit of a challenge-ish to get through. But I think I put this in near classic because I remember watching the first time I watched the Highlanders. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely wanted to watch more. But yeah, Moonbase. I'd say it's a near classic. I mean, it's a very good story. It makes the Cyberman more. It has the second story of the Cybermen. It makes them more scary than they were in the 10th planet. But I think the main issues of with this story is that one, the pacing is just absolutely poor because it just episode one just drags, and plus how Jamie was used, he was just. I understand that he came in late and they couldn't really accommodate any sort of plot point for Jamie, but at the same time, it's something that's a bit hard to overlook, to say the least. Power of the Daleks. I'd say it will be a bona fide classic, but I actually put this in the near classic area because, yeah, it's a good story. It introduces Patrick Troughton's Doctor and is the first post regeneration story, and they did really well, even though I do think that this story is a bit too plot driven for my liking. I do wish you got some development for the second Doctor at least, instead of just throwing him straight into the plot. I pretty much explained all this in my review. You can go back and watch that. So yeah, the War Games, without a doubt, a bona fide classic. I could literally write a book on how awesome this story is. It's 10 parts long. It's very tense, great tense. It introduces a lot of elements that are in Doctor Who, such as Gallifrey, the Time Lords. Or this is where the Doctor gets exiled. Emotional exits for Jamie and Zoe. Awesome characters. Just it's amazing. Space pirates. A lot of people would put this here, but I would actually put this as a meh story. I mean, I do think it does get a bit. I do think it does get over. It gets a lot of hate, which I don't think it has actually deserved. I mean, aside from the bad pacing and the fact that the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe are barely in it, there's still an enjoyable plot to say the least. I mean, it's not the worst story. I think there are worse stories than the Space Pirates, but I think it's a decent story. I think people should. I know. I mean, I remember watching it. It was a bit hard to get through, but at least it still has some elements of enjoyment that is actually there, to say the least. And we have the Crotons, another unpopular story that I actually put as a near classic because I actually had fun watching the Crotons. It was a nice break. I mean, this is Robert Holmes' first story, and the Crotons is very fun. Even though the Crotons were a bit silly, but yeah, it's still a fun story to watch, and I always enjoy watching the Crotons. To say the least, I mean, we get some good characterization in Zoe and the Doctor. Not so much Jim. I wish he did a bit more, but yeah, it's still a very good story. But I think maybe if it was like a part, maybe it was like a two parts longer, it would have been somewhat better, to say the least. And then we have the Macra Terror. I put this as a near classic because I mean I think the Macra Terror is starting to get into a lot of people's good books because of the animation now. No, but if it wasn't animated, it'd probably been like somewhere in stuck in the middle because the plot of the story is very good. It's very fun and it's very camp as well for Doctor Who. I mean, a giant crab that's menacing a colony, but that actually has the power to brainwash people. it's a good concept, and yeah, you can tell it's very original, it's very thought through, and it's a shame the story is missing. But thankfully, the telesnaps actually exist, so we can see how well the story was actually thought of. And we have Fury from the Deep, and another same situation as the Macra Terror. I think it's starting to get into people's a lot of good. This story is starting to get into people's good books because of their recent animation, and obviously, it's a very creepy story. I mean, we have like sentient seaweed. Yes, literally, people are emitting like poisonous gas from their mouths, and it's a very creepy story. Even though I think the only issue I have with the story is, I think this pacing is it's a bit slow for my liking. They did use the six parts very well, but I think there were some parts were just too slow for my liking. I mean, we get the point that there's something wrong. I think they could have at least jumped to at least some parts of the story instead of just like taking the time to get through. But I appreciate it was done, and obviously Victoria's departure was very well done. I probably say it's one of the saddest companion departures ever in Doctor Who. It's a very underrated exit as well for Victoria. I mean, she has enough of the Doctor's travels, and she decides to stay with the Harrises, and she has a very heart wrenching goodbye with Jamie. It's a very nice exit. I mean, it's really unappreciated. But now with their animation, I think it's starting to get more appreciation that it actually gets now. The invasion. I put this here because, I mean, I would maybe just depends. No, let's put it near classic because if it wasn't for Unit and the Cybermen, then I would probably been stuck in the middle because the invasion is a good story, but my problem is the first four parts really drag, and it's a bit of a chore to get through, and then the last four parts of the story it actually does pick up, and the plot is actually interesting. But I think what really lets the story down is because of the first four parts. It really drags, and I think it just shouldn't have been done. And I think episode 3 was just basically filler, to compensate for Wendy Padbury going on holiday for episode 3. I hate to say the least. And yeah, Evil of the Daleks. I put this in Bonafide Classic because this is actually my favorite missing episode because it's the great story, and if this really was the Daleks' final story, it would have been a great way for them to go because I like the whole concept of the human Daleks and the whole Dalek civil war. Have the good Daleks, good human Daleks fighting the Emperor Daleks. It was a very good story, and the pacing is very well done. It's slow in some bits, but still, but I think if the plot actually makes up for it, we were introduced to Victoria in the story, and she had a good introduction, and a bit sad as well because her father actually dies in the end of the story because at the hand of the Daleks, and she has no choice but to travel with the Doctor. But it was a very fun story for me to watch, and episode 7 is just phenomenal. I really love it. I like, and whenever I think of Evil of the Daleks, I think of episode 7 because it's just fantastic. I really do hope this story does get animated one day, and if it does get animated, I'm sure a lot of people will be considering Evil of the Daleks to be one of their favorite Troughton episodes. And of course, up next we have the Mind Dropper. This is a tough one. I think I put this in near classic because I know a lot of people enjoyed the story, myself included. But it's just I think it's a clever concept to say the least. It definitely takes Doctor Who out of the sci-fi element into the whole fantasy fiction element of Doctor Who. It very well done. The sets were phenomenal and all that, but oh yeah, I think the ending of episode 5 was extremely rushed. I think episode 5 itself was like 18 minutes long. I think that was a bit too short even for Doctor Who, but I really don't know why, but I think if it was a bit longer or something, it probably been a bona fide classic. Tomb of the Cyberman. This is a divisive story of recent. A lot of people think it's overrated, but I think not. I think for me, it's a bona fide classic. It's also my favorite Cyberman story ever in Doctor Who. It's just so phenomenal. Like the plot really gets you. It's short but sweet, but it's still exciting. We have fun villains. The Cybermen are creepy. We get great moments, and I really like how the Doctor's speech with Victoria is telling her how they were the only people in the universe that are actually traveling. And I really like how he was telling Victoria that how he thinks of his family, they're pretty much asleep in his mind, and then when he closes his eyes, he sees them, and then it was a very sweet. It was a very sweet moment for the two, and it really shows Deborah Watling's range in this story. And Victoria herself was pretty awesome. I mean, yeah, she does scream at times, but she was able to at least outsmart some of the people there. I think when I remember the scene when Captain was holding Victoria hostage with a gun, she was able to trick her into thinking that there was a Cyberman behind her, and it actually attacked her. So it was a very funny scene. I think Victoria definitely gets some good bits in there. Jamie as well is a very fun story. The side characters were great, to say the least. And I also love the scene with the Cybermen coming out of their tombs. It's just mwah, awesome. Underwater Menace, no, just no. I cannot stand the Underwater Menace. It's just so boring. Like, it really drags. And the thing is, I think this is so stupid because I think the actor that played Zorro was actually taking his role seriously, and I think the other people that were there, they didn't really care. And I think they were a little bit worried at how this story was going to turn out because it was a bit silly. The fish people outfits, the fish people. I mean, what purpose do they actually serve other than just looking utterly ridiculous? Even by 60 standards, it's just, ugh, no. No, 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 no. I can't. I'm sorry. I can never see myself liking this story, I'm afraid. Then we have the Dominators. I don't really care for this story. I mean, I remember thinking it was underrated at my first watch of this story, but then when it came to my second watch of this story, I just think it was just boring to say the least because well, not as boring as the Underwater Menace, but it's just still there was a lot of faults that were there, but it was still interesting. I mean, the plot was interesting, but it's just the direction and the pacing, even in the writing, was just no, it wasn't really that fantastic to say the least. The Web of Fear. This is probably going to be a very controversial choice because I know this is a lot of people's favorites, but I think for me, it's just in the middle for me because good story, yes. I like how scary it was, but it was too slow for my liking to say the least because we kind of get the point. I like the whole mystery of who has the great intelligence possessed, but it's just I don't know. It's just I think it got a bit tedious at some point, and I think I didn't really understand why they were trying to make the brigadier. He at the time in this story he was the colonel. How making him to be all mysterious and all that, even though there really wasn't any need, considering the fact that whole gimmick was pretty much dropped in an instant. It didn't really work for me, and obviously the Yeti were a huge improvement from when they appeared in the Abominable Snowman. They were a lot scarier. It was nice to see Travers with his daughter, and it was it's an overall good story. And the great intelligence, great villain, but I just think my main problems with this story, just think it drags a bit. Then we have the Seeds of Death. Obviously, this would be a bona fide classic because the Seeds of Death is actually my favorite classic Who story ever because it's amazing. I think I can literally write a book on why I love the Seeds of Death, and even my review I kind of explained that. But to keep it short and sweet, it's brilliant. The Ice Warrior is fantastic, great moments. And I think this is great moments, with great cliffhangers. Jamie and Zuri used brilliantly. I think this is probably the best. Aside from the war games, this is probably the best that ever been used. To say the least, even Troughton, he even got a bit of a kick in this story, especially in the scene where he's even on the thumbnail when he was confronted with the foam and the seed pods. It's just crazy. I fucking love it. And we have the Wheel in Space. I would put this in the mech category because good story, yes, but it's just a bit tedious. I find it very tedious at times. The Cybermen were okay, but they just looked a bit weird and they weren't really used that well, to say the least. I just think they were just there for the purpose of the plot. But the wheel set was nice, but just overall it's not a story that I look back and think, oh my god, I love it, but not really. I mean, it's just there. The Ice Warriors. I put this in as meh as well. I mean, I would put this as no, just no, but there are some elements of this story that are actually decent. But it's just I mean, they had. I like the message of how the message of the man versus machine and all that, but it's just and the whole Ice Age setting was just great, but it's just the pacing of the story was just awful because part one really I think the story actually drags throughout because I do think that it should have been at least 2 parts shorter, man, because it wasn't that fantastic because episodes 2 and 3, yeah, I think it actually worked if they were merged together, and it actually did work because when it was released in the VHS back in the late 90s, and as also you can also find that in the DVD release, they actually made a recon of episodes 2 and 3, and it actually worked, and I find it more enjoyable than actual episodes 2 and 3 as individual episodes. But yeah, it's just not really a story that I really think back and look, ooh, yay. Abominable Snowman, I'll actually put this in stuck in the middle. Same issue as the Web of Fear. Good story, great characters, but the episode length, the story length, it doesn't really do it justice because 6 parts long, yes, it works, but at the same time, it just drags at times, and there are parts in the times that I actually find it rather boresome. And yeah, and we have the enemy of the world. Ooh, I definitely put this here. I mean, it is actually my top 5 of Troughton stories. It's just this story, just it's a brilliant story, very James Bond esque, but it's just for me. I just think they could have done things a lot better. I mean, I do wish Faria. I mean, she was a great character, but unfortunately, she died in episode 4. I do wish she got to see the end of the story, and especially Salamander's defeat. And yeah, you can watch more of my review on why I think the enemy of the world is brilliant. But I just think it could have been a little if they improved on like some bits and pieces here and there. It would probably been a bona fide classic. And finally, we have the Faceless Ones. I'll put this as a near classic as well. Underrated, once same situation as the Crotons and the Macra Terror. Sorry, the Macra Terror and Fury from the Deep. The animation actually gave this story some prestige, to say the least. I mean, it's a very good story, and it's quite scary as well because you have these chameleons. They look creepy as hell. They pretty much kidnap humans, and then they take over the human's identity. It's just pretty much creepy, and the way they act as well is just scary. And considering the fact they were using the planes to transport the humans to their base so it can actually clone them, and then how they actually deal with them, they pretty much freeze them and just lock them up in boxes, especially what we saw what they did with Polly in episode 2. Yeah, it was episode 2. They just pretty much just froze her, and then her chameleon stuff was just there. It was pretty creepy. So it was very well written as well. And obviously this is the first story written by Malcolm Hawke, who does a lot of stories in the Pertwee era, and yeah. So that is my ranking for the second Doctor's era. Let me know what you think, and until then, I'll see you for the third Doctor's review of this specific ranking, and I will see you when I actually do my fourth Doctor reviews.